We have many beautiful days in Hamul, so solar installation makes sense. We started by observing how the shadows moved across the site to be prepared. We had to cut some trees. In fact, we cut quite a few. The first step was to lay out the site. There was a lot of measuring and laying out the rails to where the site is. Gail and Toby came to visit. When I first started laying out the bases, it became very clear that the land was nowhere near level enough to be ready for installation. So I had to start leveling the land by using the rails to get straight lines. At first I didn't know how to do this very well. I tried to use the long rail as the leveling device, but it was cumbersome and heavy and difficult to move. On the second day I was perfecting my technique. I was still using the long beam, the Unistrut, but you can see how much sand it took to fill the gaps. I had gaps of up to 5 inches in places, and also there were some peaks as well that had to be taken off. So it became a bit of a grind to get this done, but I became very systematic, and it essentially took me a full day to get one row installed. The last thing, I put a light layer of cement on top of the sand to give it a light crust when it dries and it's more stable. Then I had to take out the rails and do the walks between the panels separately. 1 yard of sand just for these 2 rows. That was more than I expected. The next day I figured out that I can use 2 rails together. This allowed me to use a much shorter leveler, which speeded up the work quite a bit. It was handier and quicker. The Unistrut on the ground shows how irregular the surface is. I started in the middle and proceeded outwards. On the north end, I had to really fixture the rails to a structure because the surface was sloping down so badly. So here's a problem that plagues all solar systems. Eventually the sun goes down. As I was finishing, Nicole came to see me. The array field was beginning to look pretty nice. It was satisfying placing the bases. I started screwing them down in a preliminary way to connect these grids to make sure that they were properly aligned. Little finishing touches on the edge with sand and cement. Since I still had light, I could start on the next row. By this time, I was used to this work and it was going much quicker. So it went row by row until I finally finished this thing. Last few finishing touches and the field is ready for full installation. Meanwhile, Greg came to dig out the ditch and prepare it for electrical installation. Sean came to show me the fasteners that I needed and also the electrical connections. It was an amazingly windy day when I was putting down the rest of the bases. I got sandblasted at times. Finishing the bases was an important milestone. Next came the rails. I had to weld them together. The longest 2 were 48 feet. I built wheeled chassis to drag them around because they were too long to carry. I installed the first rail, and then Gail and Toby came to visit again. More work on my knees as I had to screw everything down. I used over 1,500 fasteners on this grid. Another day ends. Installing the center rail was even more fun. I had to take out all the fasteners first. Gail came to visit again. Then Jaja came to visit and inspect the job to make sure it was done properly. And so ends another day. Screwing it all back down was a lot more fun. There was a lot of it. Gail called me the best screw in town. Then I had to drill under the sidewalk using my specially built drill bit. It makes for unexciting video, but it was hard work. One of the last steps before the installation of the panels was digging out of the stub trench to connect the conduit to the grid of panels. This was shovel and pick work, and it was unusually hot for February. Next came the attachment of the power optimizers, one per panel. They are screwed down directly to the bases. Hammering the ground rods in, and installing the ground wire for the power optimizers, and screwing down the wire. That's only half of it, because the panels themselves and the rails will also have to be grounded. Finally, the big day. Sean came to help with his template to drill out the holes for the panels. Looks pretty crazy, but there were a lot of connections to be made. In any case, this activity is to connect all the power optimizers to the main conduit. And finally, panel installation. This was a rewarding piece, and we had Sean and Gail helping with that. We had to install fasteners. Gail says hi. Then we had to put the panels, and we transported them from below on the trailer, but you cannot see that. It's off the frame. And finally, it is completed. Time for lunch. In case you think we're done, well, we're far from it. The next thing we had to do is screw down all the panels to the bases. Everybody helped. Then we had to make electrical connections, connecting the panels to the power optimizers. And so ends another very successful day. The last stage of electrical connection is grounding the panels to the rails and to the ground rods. When this step is complete, the panels will be ready to produce power. There is a lot of bending and kneeling on this job. It's all very good. It keeps me in shape and stay flexible. Finish up the electrical connection work and the final consultation with the electrician who is connecting the system to the house. I had to use my heavy hauler mobile crane to pull out the stake at the corner. After some final fastener work screwing things down, the system is ready to generate power. We are done. I thank you for your attention and greetings from beautiful Hamel. Wish you were here.